He's chewing the life out of me. A minute ago, he just showed me his phone. Daniel Levy's texting him out.
Shut up.
Honestly,
That's indiscreet.
bloody-
Really? That's indiscreet.
Honestly.
Oh, I love it. No, you asked for that.
No, I
Sickening it
didn't.
is.
I watched
No,
you
I
do it. Ben, look at this.
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
I was showing him a fact about the Brighton deal and how Brighton have pulled Spurs' pants down on a player that was out of contract in a year's time that didn't want to sign a new contract. And there's the fifth most expensive, soon-to-be non-contract player that has ever been signed. So that's what Daniel was pointing out to some extent.
Fair enough. It's entertaining sitting beside.
This was apparently the view of Daniel Levy on the Tottenham Hotspur's decision to buy Jan-Paul Van Hecke from Brighton for £52 million with just 1 year remaining on his contract. Now, each and every one of us Spurs fans would know if Daniel Levy was negotiating this deal, how it would have gone through. It would still might not have been over. We would have still be hearing every day or two about the difference between the prices of Brighton and Spurs, and the negotiation would be going on. And this, we have seen this story similarly in the past, like in 2018 for Jack Grealish, when we had agreed the personal terms with the player. The player was wanting to come to Spurs. Everything was ready, but Spurs kept haggling for the fees, and then Villa got a cash injection and they stopped the transfer. Same thing happened a year later with Bruno Fernandes. Again, the player had agreed to join Spurs, but we couldn't get the deal done with Sporting and the deal was off. The June 2026 of this summer transfer window was like a fever dream for all of the Spurs fans. 6 signings, £237 million spent, and the club transfer record broken twice within a matter of days, and our first ever 100 million signing in Sandro Tonali. Now, a lot of this was done based on the platform that was built by the work done by Daniel Levy over the years at club in over last 2 decades. He moved Tottenham from a mid-table club to a club that competed regularly in Europe and was able to, because of that, generate a much higher revenue than rest of the league, allowing Spurs under the new rules, SCR rules, which we discussed in the previous video, to spend more money than some other clubs in the league, even though having 2 poor seasons in the league. Ironically though, the club starts to invest and show ambition a year after Daniel Levy has left, knowing that this has been done a large part based on the work of Daniel Levy in building the new stadium and consistently getting Spurs in Europe for the most of the 2010s decade.
You know, when you walk into Tottenham, what you see everywhere is to dare is to do. It's everywhere. And yet their actions are almost the antithesis of that.
Problems for Daniel Levy. He was very good at certain things, but not very good at other things. And at a time where he was probably required to look at the bigger picture and set a vision or direction for the club, he might have focused too much on the smaller things and 2 things which someone else could have taken care of, and which led to him unable to take control of the overall project, which led to his decline. Now, in the part 1 of the video, we pointed out 2 major failings for Daniel Levy's last 7 years at the club, and those 2 were the rigid wage structure and the lack of direction, which resulted in a lack of ambition for the club. It was not clearly lack of ambition, as if you would look, Spurs have spent a lot of money in the recent transfer window. However, they've spent a lot of money on transfer fees, but not a lot on wages, meaning we were paying more money for players that may not have been the best in those positions, because we were unable to get the top target, because we couldn't compete on wages. A great example of this was last summer was Antoine Semenyo, who we wanted to buy. Thomas Frank even came out after the January transfer window saying we tried to sign Antoine Semenyo, but we couldn't because of the wages. And the problem was we couldn't compete with Manchester City on the wages, and that led to the player going to Manchester City. And because of that, in January we didn't sign any alternative. In the previous window we would have signed some second choice players for that position and would end up not getting the best out of them, and then paying good high transfer fees for them, but ending up selling them for next to nothing. Again, there are multiple examples of this. You can look at Tanguy Ndombele, Giovanni Lo Celso, Brian Hill, Yves Bissouma, etc. There are a lot of examples in the last 6 or 7 years of the players who we've signed for a lot of fees and then ended up letting them go for free or for very little amount. Now, in this video and the previous video, we've been very critical of Daniel Levy. However, that is because we've mostly focused on the footballing side of the things, and we've talked about how we've lacked a vision in terms of what we want on the pitch. However, you cannot ignore that a lot of the criticism is because of the fact that the expectations were increased in the a decade and a half prior to that, and that was done. A lot of part has to be gone to Daniel Levy. Like Spurs went from around mid-table to constantly getting into Europa League under Martin Jol, and then breaking into the first briefly getting one season in Champions League in the Harry Redknapp, and then continuously qualifying under Pochettino. And this was done under Daniel Levy, and we did sign a lot of great players in that period. Yeah, look at Berbatov, Modric, Bale, and then later on Kane from academy, Ericsson, Son, Ali, and there are a lot of other players. So there were a lot of things that were done well in that period, which led to a very stable base for Spurs to succeed. Although there was a lack of trophies in that period, but if you look at just the league, Spurs were one of the more consistent teams, finishing always in the top six, and whenever they got the chance, getting into the top four, and more so in the later part under Pochettino, punching above the weight. And couple that with the very good stadium that Daniel Levy built and increasing the commercial revenue in various aspects, Spurs were able to go from having a big gap between themselves and the other big five clubs, that is Manchester United, Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, where the gap would be 100 million if we were not in Champions League, to now having ability to match their revenues with ours. And we had more revenue than Chelsea last 2 3 years because of that stadium and because of our increased commercial revenues in part to the stadium, and that is going to increase in the future. So a lot of credit has to also go to Daniel Levy for what we have done in the past. In this summer window, a lot of it has been built on the platform set up by Daniel Levy. Ultimately, the history would look at Daniel Levy as a conundrum. In one sense, he changed the direction of the club and brought it from far back to a more relevant status. But on the other hand, he would be someone who failed to take advantage of the opportunity that were presented to him in the various moments. So, what's your thoughts about it? What's your thought on Daniel Levy? And this will be the second part of this. If you haven't watched part one, do check it out. And based on those two, what do you agree with my opinion, or do you have something else? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.